Hey folks, welcome to another week at the Quinn Tabor Show. I am excited to kick off 2026 kind of in a different way. And that is to look ahead at what I really have learned in the last year, what set of policies I'm most enthusiastic about, and what would I love to see from Silicon Valley and DC over the next 12 months. In the last couple episodes, I've done some predictions. I've spoken about where the big LLMs are going and where the modern age of warfare will be. But I think what I've been intrigued in myself over the holiday break, kind of taking notes on oh my gosh, I've done this for 6 months now. What are the central themes that I just find myself repeating and most fired up on? And it is how in DC, I would be excited about candidates and about policy that is done with the military wars, the trade wars, the culture wars, and instead is 100% focused on helping you and I achieve the American dream. And then if I kind of go one layer past that, my role as an AI entrepreneur and all the unique learnings that I've kind of collected over the last 8 years, it's then how can AI and tech innovation writ large solve some of the most concerning existential problems in this next generation? Our fiscal deficit, the AI arms race with China, the affordability crisis, the housing crisis, the healthcare crisis, the energy crisis. Oh my gosh. How can AI and innovation kind of triage each of those, but not in a way that sounds all waxing poetic and using big trillion-dollar terms, but instead root it all in the everyday that you and I live? Man, if we had an energy renaissance in the US, what would that mean for me? What would that mean for my neighbor? Would that mean it would save me $10 on my energy bills or $90? Or would energy ever be free one day? What about healthcare? So I'm going to dive right in because over the holidays, I'll tell you exactly what I did. I downloaded the transcripts of all my podcasts. I plugged it into an LLM and said, hey, what are the 10 things that I speak the most about? And compile it into a little brief. It was good. Then I was so drawn to it that I spent some time kind of crafting it more intentionally and doing a couple drafts. So where typically I record this with no notes, I'm going to record literally reading what the 10 policies I would be most fired up about for kind of the future Silicon Valley and DC. And each time I'll just quantify, what does that mean for, what does this policy translate to? And the number of new high-paying jobs, 6-figure salary jobs. So new jobs created. What would it mean for your and my annual cost savings? And then if instituted a decade from now, what would it mean for our fiscal deficit? So here we go. This is going to feel a little bit like Quinn reading his audiobook. Instead of looking up here, if you're watching me, you're going to see me look down a little bit because I am reading, and it's going to sound a little different. But 10 policies, ready, go. The first one is doubling GDP growth rate. Real GDP growth is the most powerful tool to reduce the deficit. For a developed nation like the US, achieving 4% real GDP growth rate would generate trillions in federal revenue and help balance the budget without cutting essential programs. Each additional 1 percentage point in growth translates to $1 trillion in annual federal revenue a decade from now. Revenue that comes from broader economic activity, not higher tax rates. The number one key lever to increasing GDP is boosting labor productivity, the output of the American worker's hour. This requires a dual strategy of talent development, technology adoption, and infrastructure investment. Training and upskilling workers for high-value industries ensures the workforce can compete in the global economy. Creating regulation that bolsters AI adoption across sectors, not slow it, will streamline work, reduce costs, and improve output. by government partnering with the private sector to grant tax credits and incentives across the board to accelerate AI, revolutionizing key sectors like manufacturing, logistics, administrative work, which in turn automates routine tasks and raises the output per hour worked, will effectively serve as a fiscal multiplier in GDP growth and federal revenue. Boom. That's my first, brief. I hope it makes sense. GDP growth rate. I think the thing that I'll get to in each of these policies is that the amazing part, for each percentage point in GDP growth rate, it translates to 1 to 2 million jobs. So going from, over the last 2 decades, 2% real GDP growth to 4%, something that AI analysts laud as viable, that would translate to at least 3 million new jobs in the AI economy. And there's a lot of ways to slice this, but just by lowering the fiscal deficit, that would translate to $3,000 a year in saved costs for you and me, which really is $2.5 trillion off the deficit. But I'm just going to keep going. You're gonna recognize some of these are like, oh yeah, Quinn, this is the drum that you keep beating. So the second one, the thing that I'm probably second most excited about on the power of AI is modernizing healthcare. Healthcare dominates the largest portion of federal spending, about 26% of total outlays, and administrative inefficiency alone is estimated at $1 trillion annually. AI can disrupt this antiquated bureaucracy by automating paperwork and approvals, cutting administrative waste, accelerating new drug discovery, and enabling cost-effective preventative care. AI-driven health services and predictive analytics improves outcomes by 30 to 40% per patient while reducing per capita cost by 50%. Government leadership that embraces AI modernization will dramatically improve the experience of the everyday Medicare and Medicaid patient and Americans across the board. Imagine a world where your health is managed by an ambient clinical intelligence that listens to your doctor's visits and automates all the paperwork, allowing for 100% of the time to be spent on human-to-human connection. What about personal guardrail sensors that interpret your biological data in real time, catching early signs of chronic illness to trigger a remote medication adjustment before you feel sick or ever need an ER visit? Finally, AI-accelerated drug discovery will replace the trial and error medicine with precision treatments designed for your specific genetic markers, ensuring every dollar spent results in a cure rather than a symptom managed. This reality is possible in this decade, all the while reducing federal healthcare expenditures by $600 billion. That isn't like the gross domestic product that's spent on healthcare. That's just the federal government's bill, $600 billion annually, which, same thing, that is a 50% reduction. That means getting rid of the bureaucratic bloat, the $1 trillion, and saving you and I, on average, at least 50% in our annual expenses. If you're a family of 4 with a 6-figure income, or like $100,000 income, you're spending $11,000 per year on health insurance. That is, doesn't even include all the ways that your employer is probably committing even more than that. But man, to save half of $11,000, $5,500 a year for the family earning $100,000, that's life-changing. That's totally life-changing. And then the really interesting one is the types of jobs that exist in that new era where we aren't just taking notes and getting kind of pre-authorization for the next procedure, having AI do that. The types of high human connection, diagnostic, and treatment would actually create a net new 4 million jobs at a higher price point. If you want to see all my calculations, I'm going to link kind of my research here. Each of these briefs has its own set of calculations that you can click through yourself if you're interested. Number 3, third policy I am hyped on. That is, how the heck do we reform Social Security? Social Security represents one of the largest long-term federal obligations, accounting for roughly $1.4 trillion annually, nearly 20% of the total federal spending in 2025. It is currently funded through a variety of trust funds invested in low-yield Treasury securities, earning roughly 2% real returns. While this safe approach preserves capital, it severely limits growth over decades. The last major alteration to the trust fund occurred in 1983 under President Reagan. If the trust fund had been reinvested in the S&P 500 at that time, just like a host of other countries do, like Canada, Australia, Japan, the Netherlands, Social Security would not only be fully solvent today, it would hold a surplus of approximately $12 trillion at the end of 2025. That is enough to eliminate projected shortfalls for decades and meaningfully reduce federal deficits. It is time to reform the investment rules of Social Security and finally have all Americans invested in the top performing public companies and tech companies and take part in the massive wealth generation in this AI era by investing Social Security in a mix of stocks and bonds and real estate. Not only will it fix our annual budget, it will lower your and my annual tax rate, and it will reroute trillions of dollars, not to treasury bills, but to fuel further stock market growth, all helping you and I achieve the American dream. So what's the breakdown? The estimate here is, in order to fund Social Security, right now you and I pay 6.2% of our income up to $168,000, but 6.2%. Our employer matches that. If we went from a 2% return profile to an average of 7 or 8, this is confusing math. You can click if you want to see more. But we would be able to put in a third as much in our Social Security taxes and yet break even. So if you're making $100,000 a year, you're spending 6.2% on Social Security, you'd only need to spend 2.2%. That saves you $4,000 right there. And we would still be breaking even better than we have done, which right now we're on track for that kind of Social Security shortfall in 2033. To unlock the trillions of dollars in that trust fund would create as well millions in new jobs. And ultimately, by 2035, it would lead to a $400 billion annual improvement to our deficit, an extra $400 billion that right now we do not have allocated. So that is why my third policy is freaking reform Social Security. Number 4, we need to build 5 million new homes. The U.S. currently faces a shortage of 5 million homes, a gap that drives up prices and makes it impossible for many to build wealth. Federal and state policies must move beyond temporary fixes like rent freezes, which ultimately reduce the number of available homes, and embrace a yes in my backyard approach. This starts with changing outdated rules so it is legal to build $200,000 duplexes and townhomes, the missing middle in cities across America. We also need to speed up the paperwork by using AI to digitize local building rules. This allows developers to check their plans instantly, cutting the time it takes to get a permit from several months to just a few days. Simultaneously, if we adopt high-tech building methods, it will lower costs. I have geeked out on 3D printing and advanced materials and factory-scale production that will allow you to print the walls of a sturdy home in less than 24 hours. That eliminates all construction waste, it avoids weather delays, and lowers construction costs by 60%. So what are the numbers? Drum roll. If we build 5 million new homes, that will create 3 million jobs. It's a huge number. The average savings for an American making $100,000 a year, the average right now, is spending a third of their income on housing, most of the time on rent. A third. This kind of structural reset would similarly go after the goal of lowering the average American's housing cost by half. To create a host of new $200,000, $250,000 accessible homes for like starter families with way lower construction cost, and ideally on federal land that gets repurposed for construction, the 660 million acres that belong to the federal government, primarily in the Bureau of Land Management, that would cut housing costs in half from roughly $35,000 to about $17,000. That's game-changing for you and me. That's game-changing for my peers. And ultimately, the really interesting one is the revenue inflows from that kind of construction boom would also lower the deficit by $200 billion. It's a massive boon to to the average American, but also to the deficit. The next one, if you're a frequent listener, you have heard me talk about how it is time to ignite an energy renaissance. America's economic leadership now hinges on a historic energy expansion as AI driven investment accounted for roughly 92% of US GDP growth in the first half of 2025. This computing supercycle has funneled nearly $400 billion in private capital commitments into data centers and semiconductors. Yet, this progress faces one critical bottleneck: a national power grid nearing its breaking point. Without a massive increase in reliable, affordable electricity, the U.S. risks losing $64 billion in committed investments and facing blackout risks that could increase 100-fold in high-demand regions by the end of the decade. Securing our future requires a proactive shift towards energy abundance by accelerating the deployment of next-generation power systems, by modernizing federal permitting and equalizing the subsidy landscape. Where fossil fuels currently receives 9 times more support than renewables, we can deploy solar and wind assets that are 50 to 60% cheaper and significantly faster to build than legacy power plants. This strategy transforms energy from a scarce constraint into you're going to hear this word a lot, a fiscal multiplier, powering the high-tech manufacturing and AI infrastructure necessary to sustain 4% GDP growth rate and generate an additional $200 billion in annual federal revenue by 2035. This transition delivers an energy dividend that fundamentally lowers the cost of living for everyday American households. By collapsing the cost of electricity through abundant, low-cost renewables, nuclear, and smart grid efficiency, the average American family can see their annual energy expenditures drop by up to 80%, saving per household about $4,800. Furthermore, this energy renaissance is projected to create 10 million new high-paying jobs in energy manufacturing and grid operations, with many roles paying 50 to 60% higher wages than legacy energy sectors today. That will rebuild the high-skill middle class and secure the American dream for millions more. So what are the numbers I just rattled off? It would save you and I, the average person making 6 figures, 100K, that would save you $4,800 per year. It would create 10 million new jobs, which is unthinkable. And those are high-paying jobs, 50% higher than the current energy kind of payroll, and reduce the deficit by $200 billion. It's just another massive bet with huge potential kind of positive outcomes. Here we go. I'm going to keep going fast. What's the next policy? Revive manufacturing in the U.S. with robotics. America leads when innovation is matched with the infrastructure to sustain it. For decades, manufacturing fled offshore in search of cheap labor. Today, advanced robotics is bringing it home. By matching American ingenuity with robotic precision, we can finally launch an onshoring renaissance that collapses consumer prices while rebuilding the middle class. Robotics acts as the ultimate deflationary force for a new era of abundance. Lower consumer prices? How do we do that? Automation eliminates the offshore premium, the cost of shipping, tariffs, and supply chain delays. Right now, if we operated with 24/7 near zero waste robotic systems, we would reduce production costs by 40%, passing direct savings to the American consumer. Next one, we are trading repetitive manual labor for high-value careers. In this future, the factory floor demands robotic technicians and systems engineers. These roles require technical certifications, not 4-year degrees, and pay 30 to 50% more than traditional frontline manufacturing jobs. Last one, what kind of domestic resilience would this create? Agile robotic cells can be reprogrammed in days, allowing the U.S. and our companies to pivot faster than any offshore competitor. This isn't just about bringing jobs back. It's about building a superior, high-wage industrial base that ensures national security and domestic abundance. Here we go. What are the numbers? If we brought manufacturing back onshore, like I said, we wouldn't have to worry about supply chains and tariffs. That alone would save the average American household $4,500 a year. That would spur the economy, and save substantially, leading to a $240 billion deficit reduction and 2 million new jobs in this high-paying kind of future of manufacturing sector. Like I said, it's not the rote job on the conveyor belt. It is the robotic technician and systems engineer. Once again, paid 50% more than the current industry. Here we go. We're making progress. We're past halfway. Next one is democratize free AI education. Education is the engine of the American dream, yet it is currently stalled by skyrocketing costs and outdated factory model classrooms. In the AI era, we must pivot to a model of personalized abundance. AI is the ultimate equalizer, collapsing the cost of elite-level instruction and ensuring a world-class education is no longer a luxury, but a common utility accessible to every zip code. By leveraging AI as a force multiplier for students and teachers, we can achieve superior outcomes at a fraction of the cost. I'm going to break down just the 3 areas. The first being, what if every American learner had access to a private tutor, an AI private tutor? Historically, one-on-one tutoring was the exclusive domain of the wealthy. AI now provides every student with a 24/7 personal tutor in their pocket. These systems adapt to a student's specific pace and learning style, increasing the efficacy of learning while reducing the need for expensive remedial programs. Next would be collapsing the administrative sector. Much of the $1.6 trillion spent annually in the US on education is trapped in bureaucratic bloat. AI automates grading, lesson planning, scheduling. It frees teachers up to focus on high-value mentorship and relational support while lowering the overhead costs of school districts. What's the last one? This one's so pertinent. It's going to be critical to reskill those displaced by AI. The 2026 workforce demands rapid upskilling on AI-driven platforms that can curate custom micro-credentials that prepare workers for high-paying robotics and tech roles in months, not years, for a few $100s instead of a 6-figure degree. Democratizing free AI education isn't just about making school cheaper. It is about making the American dream attainable for everyone by leveling the playing field of human potential. Here we go. What is the average family of 4 making $100,000 a year? If you calculate up their, if you're the adult, probably your college tuition debt. If you add up all the extracurricular spent on tutoring and learning for your student and saving up for their college, this new AI-empowered era would save the average American household $14,000 a year. It's a huge number. It's a huge number. Same thing, the amount that the U.S. spends in the education sector on that bureaucratic bloat that could be reduced $310 billion. And ultimately would both still keep the teachers in the loop, maintaining their employment, but would give a whole new class of Americans access to higher paying jobs, ultimately leading to new job creation. All right, how many do we have left? 3 left. 7 down. Driving AI-led government efficiency. The federal government is the world's largest enterprise, yet it remains burdened by manual workflows and legacy systems. Integrating AI into the core operations of all 400 federal agencies represents a digital reconstruction that collapses bureaucratic overhead and dramatically lowers the fiscal deficit. Number 1, how do we eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse? The GAO, I think that's the Government Accountability Office, estimates that the federal government loses up to $500 billion annually to waste, fraud, and abuse. And currently has this pay and chase model that is reactive and slow, but AI-powered prepayment analytics will scan every federal transaction in real time, flagging anomalies before funds ever leave the Treasury. Recovering 50% of this waste through AI-driven auditing and tax gap enforcement creates a $260 billion revenue stream. What's the next one? It's workforce productivity. The federal office administrative support tasks currently have a 75% exposure to AI automation. Much of the government's $1.1 trillion annual payroll is routine data entry and record summarizing. Automating routine tasks like benefit processing, inquiry handling, document routing saves an estimated 1.2 billion man-hours annually. Rather than mass layoffs, the government can achieve a Silicon Valley-style workforce just through natural attrition, simply not replacing the 30% of federal workforce that's eligible for retirement. leading to a $110 billion reduction in annual payroll costs. And then the last one, this is kind of that last big one, is the defense logistics sector. The DoD is the largest single agency spender with nearly $300 billion annually dedicated to operations and maintenance. Shifting from reactive to predictive maintenance using AI sensors and digital twins allows the military to fix a jet engine or carrier turbine before it fails, extending the life of multi-billion-dollar platforms like the F-35 and reducing the iron mountain of unnecessary spare parts of inventory will directly slash the cost of readiness, leading to another $90 billion in O&M savings. So what are we talking here? The fiscal deficit done well on these three levers would save $460 billion a year. Huge sum. How does that boil down to you? That's about $1,800 a year of money back in your pocket without directly cutting core workforce today, not leading to mass displacement. I think that's one that we can all agree. It's an era where our government truly gets efficient. Not in that partisan way that Doge just kind of went after left-leaning agencies, but truly attained efficiency. That is something in all of our best interest. All right, two left. Second to last, upgrade our military for AI warfare. Warfare has reached a fundamental step change where victory is no longer defined by the size of a standing army, but by the speed of its engineering sprints. In the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, the cycle of tactical adaptation has shrunk from 1 to 2 years to just 4 to 6 weeks, with early 2026 data revealing that Russian casualties have exceeded 1.2 million, 80% of which are now attributable to autonomous drone systems. The era of exquisite $50 million platforms is being challenged by mass, where decentralized swarms and embodied AI neutralize traditional movement in real time. If the United States fails to pivot from a hardware-first bureaucracy to a software-first elite military, we risk obsolescence against adversaries like China. We need to be on track for a battlefield ready military equipped with the drones of the future, humanoid robots, autonomous wingmen, and that is in the next 5 to 10 years. Reimagining our defense infrastructure requires a shift towards mass-produced, low-cost, autonomous systems that prioritize speed as the new stealth. By scaling initiatives like the Drone Dominance Program, aiming for 300,000 platforms across all services, and integrating precision lasers and microwave barriers, the U.S. can neutralize multi-million-dollar threats for a fraction of the cost. This technological pivot doesn't just improve combat efficacy from 30% to 80%, it serves as a massive fiscal lever. By reducing the reliance on $2 trillion legacy life cycles and the last mile manual logistics, an AI-first military can generate an estimated $150 billion in annual federal savings by 2036, effectively ending the era of trillion-dollar procurement waste. For the average American, this military renaissance delivers a security dividend that protects lives and the national purse. Shifting to a tech-first defense reduces the need for large-scale troop deployment, ensuring the soldier of the future operates as a high-skill software manager far from the front line. This efficiency allows for a significant reallocation of the $900 billion defense budget, which contributes to a $2,500 annual reduction in your and my tax burden. Furthermore, the commercialization of military AI and 3D printing breakthroughs will create 2 million new high-paying jobs in our domestic defense technology sector, ensuring that the same innovations keep us safe, and they're also powering the next generation of the American middle class. So what are the numbers here? An AI-first prepared military would reduce our deficit by $150 billion a year, put $2,500 back in your pocket, and potentially catalyze 2 million new jobs in this high-tech defense sector that looks completely different from the military of the last generation. What's my last one? It's all about how do we reverse the debt spiral? The U.S. national debt has reached a critical inflection point, with net interest outlays exceeding $1 trillion annually, surpassing the entire national defense budget and becoming the second largest federal expenditure behind only Social Security. The interest trap currently consumes nearly 1 out of every 5 tax dollars collected, functioning as a massive drain on the economy that yields no public service, infrastructure, or security. Reversing this trend requires moving beyond passive debt management to a proactive strategy of high velocity GDP growth. By achieving a 4% real growth rate, the US can outpace its borrowing costs, naturally shrink the debt to GDP ratio, and restore global confidence in the US dollar. This growth dividend creates a virtuous cycle. As the economy expands relative to the debt, the perceived risk of US Treasuries falls, triggering a reduction in interest rates that actually saves the government up to $500 billion a year. This fiscal shift delivers a lower interest dividend that drastically reduces the cost of major life milestones. As the federal government stops crowding out private capital, mortgage rates are projected to fall by 1.5% to 2%, saving the average homeowner $6,000 a year in interest rate payments. When combined with cheaper auto loans and reduced credit card APRs, the typical middle-class household will keep an additional $5,000 to $10,000 annually, capital that is currently lost to debt servicing but can now be redirected into personal savings and the American dream. Reversing the debt spiral is critical for my generation. What would it mean? It's a combined $11,000 back in our pocket. It's a $500 billion reduction to the national deficit by 2036. And when you free up that capital that currently is allocated to government and debt, the crowding out effect that occurs, by removing that, it would create a net new 1.5 million jobs. That's what we need. So I'm done quickly reading off each of these policies. I'm going to link to each of them below. If you want to look at my calculations, I welcome it. Each one has the link below. And I think my parting note is I've been reflecting a lot on my unique role in the AI landscape, my insight as a founder, and how us as a nation regulates AI, embraces AI, how we invite it to revolutionize healthcare and education, military, energy. The next decade is all important. And the tactical decisions we make will have multi-decade implications. And I want to spend my incremental energy, that incremental breath in my lungs, arguing for how AI needs to help you and I achieve the American dream. I care about the technology sector, but I don't need the big tech companies to make an extra $1 trillion. I need the average American to be able to afford healthcare, to buy a house they're excited about, to put food on the table, and actually put their kids through a quality education that helps them achieve the American dream and find their way into a higher earning job. That's where I want to spend my time. So if you made it thus far, I'll say it like I always do. Send this to 2 friends and shoot me a text. I want to know what you think. As always, I'm grateful for you, and another week down. See you guys next week.